He said, you can't go further into the bardo and return. And so I think that we stand at the brink of an enormous frontier. Call it incorporeality, call it non-material existence, or, bite the bullet. Call it death. But this is the frontier that we stand on the edge of. This is what history has been about. History has been some kind of suicide plot for 15,000 years. Not a moment passed that the plot was not advanced closer and closer and closer and closer to completion. And now in the 20th century, we see that this thing, this transcendental object at the end of time, this attractor that chose us out of the animal kingdom and sculpted the neocortex, opposed the thumb, stood us on our hind legs, gave us binocular vision. This thing is calling us toward itself across eons of cosmic time. We are asked to mirror it, and as we mirror it, we become more of its essence. And as we become more of its essence, we leave behind the animal organization that we were cast in the beginning. And what this is about, who knows? Is this a drama of cosmic redemption? Is it the transcendental other at the end of time? Is it a Gnostic demon? Is it Il Dabula? What is it? We do not know. But I really believe we are in the era when we will come to know. And what the psychedelics are periscopes in the temporal dimension. If you want to see a little bit into the future, elevate your psychedelic periscope outside of the three-dimensional continuum and peer around. For thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, we have been pulled toward this omega point. The Earth is like an egg. It has come to its moment of fructification. The dawn that has been anticipated since we were herding our cattle across the plains of Africa is now upon us. The east is streaked with the blush of rosy dawn. It is coming upon us, and I think that it will redeem history. That history is not a nightmare. It is a passage. It is an initiation. Think of the fetus in the womb at the moment of transition. Surely it must despair. The walls are closing in. It's being crushed and strangled. Gone are the endless amniotic oceans of a few months before, the weightlessness, the effortless delivery of food through the umbilical cord. Suddenly, it's just boundaries and agony and crushing pressure. That's where we are. And we are going to have to shed history like a snake sheds its skin if we want to slip off into hyperspace, where I think all of magical humanity is awaiting us and cheering us on, lending their weight. They're all out there, Proclus and Plotinus and Plato and Hypatia and Henry Cornelius Agrippa and John Dee and Robert Flood and Elias Levy. They're all out there pulling for us. And every shaman and shamaness, every magician, practitioner, as far back in time as you go, was part of the plan, the conjuration, the great work, the distillation of the quintessence. History is a magical invocation. And at the end of that invocation, if it is correctly done, all boundaries will dissolve into the stone, the lapis, a transdimensional vehicle that can move through space and time, that is the collectivity of all human souls, free at last in what William Blake called the don't have to wait for the general dispensation. You can join up anytime by hyperspatializing your metaphors and your point of view through psychedelic symbiosis with the plants that are pouring this hyperdimensional Gaian vision into the minds of anyone who will detoxify themselves from history and linear thinking and but open themselves to the presence of the transformative mystery that is going to leave this planet unrecognizable to us within our lifetimes. Well, Lenny, I didn't mean to diss Castaneda as a metaphor maker. No, I think the Teachings of Don Juan is a tremendous book. I'm very suspicious of some of his later stuff. It's interesting what you said, because you know the famous crow transformation in the Teachings of Don Juan has been traced, and I'm sure many of you know this book, has been traced to George MacDonald's book, Through the Gates of the Silver Key. And George MacDonald was a friend of Evans Vance. So I think what we're getting here is a mining of late 19th century English folklore by Castaneda. Nevertheless, the presence of these small entities has been a part of folklore for a long, long time. Elementals, types. What puzzles me, I guess, is I've spent a lot of time in this magical literature and art historical area, and the descriptions don't quite match. I can't quite convince myself that the sprites, the afrits, the nixies, the jinns, these creatures of the woodland fae are the same thing. Or I don't know whether I am contaminated by an early love of science fiction. Well, again, close but no banana. There, all these popular aliens that are running around, you know, the Whitley Streboids and all these things, are much more mundane than what I encountered. I mean, what I encountered was terrifyingly not human, terrifyingly alien, and I just do not quite get. And Madame Blavatsky was into it, and they're always saying, you know, I don't know, they're very sort of cut and dried about it. And when I encounter an extraterrestrial alien or a creature from another dimension, the main thing that's happening for me is the implications are blowing my mind. They seem totally immune to the implications. Yeah. Scream. Well, a sufficient amount of DMT is smoked west of the Pacific Coast Highway that it wouldn't surprise me if the writers of Star Trek, were onto this. Yes, what is not much talked about, the part of the experience which is anomalous, and maybe people who know more about magical literature than I do can correct me, but what the elves are really interested in is this stuff which I call visible language. That's the whole point of the encounter, is to exhibit it and to get you to do it. Well, now, first of all, think for a minute about ordinary language. It's really weird. It's the weirdest thing we do. I mean, if you were looking for the thumbprint of God on creation, human language would be a good candidate. Because, look, we're supposed to be some kind of animal who just went a little further than the next guy. But to get out of that Shakespeare and Milton is a pretty amazing accomplishment, hardly to speak of the mathematical languages that we generate. So something happened. Some people think only 35,000 years ago. Imagine if that's true. I mean, I don't care. Some people say 150,000 years ago. But to speak, to take small mouth noises and to turn them into signifiers for symbols and relationships, in spite of some people's enthusiasm for cetaceans and dolphins, I just am not overwhelmed by the evidence. I mean, to me, it is a miracle to be able to speak poetry. It is a miracle. I mean, when Coleridge wrote, "And south and south and southward we fled, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice mast high went floating by as green as emerald." I mean, that's language, and it's magic. And we have a fascination, then we also paint, then we sculpt, then we write, then we create electronic databases, then film, television. Clearly, what we want to do is we want to communicate visually. And these things are saying there's a way to do it. Do it! And I don't understand. Do we all have to be loaded on DMT all the time? Can you learn to do this? The gentleman who asked about dreams, here's a piece of information that is critical in this jigsaw puzzle. If you have smoked DMT at any time in the past, it is possible to have a dream in which people are running around and you're checked into the Mars Hotel and the luggage is lost and this and that, and in the middle of all that, someone drags out a little glass pipe and hands it to you. It will happen. It will happen in the dream. Not a memory, not a simulacrum. It will really happen. Well, now, to me, that's an amazing piece of data, because what it's saying is you can do it on the natch. You may have to be dead asleep, but still, on the natch, this can be done. And the lucid dreamers, the biofeedback people, the people who claim these wonderful things that you can do with sleep and dream and programming, I challenge them. Teach people to have DMT dreams in their sleep. And then let's figure out how to drag that puppy into the light so that we can do it at will on the natch. Just one second. One thing that I have come to believe is that we remember no more than 5% of our dreams, and it's the most mundane 5%. I think, and there's scientific evidence to support this. Remember I said DMT is in the human brain? Well, it concentrates in the human cerebrospinal fluid on a 24-hour cycle, and it reaches its peak of concentration between 3 and 4 a.m. in most people. That's when the deep REM sleep is happening. When you give somebody DMT, they lay back, they close their eyes, and the way you, the guide, the sitter, I don't like the word guide, you, the sitter, the way you can tell that they're getting off is their eyes dart wildly behind their closed eyelids. It means they're in REM. They're in REM sleep. They've been immediately shoved into deep dreaming. So I believe that what DMT is doing in normal human metabolism is it mediates the descent, the spiral descent into dream, and that every single night we are reunited with the boundaryless oceanic mystery of being that we are so frantic about in waking life and so distant from. And that if we could in fact just engineer a drug that would allow us to remain fully conscious as we drift deeper into dream, we would need no other drug or substance. That's where we want to go. And I think that's where history is headed. What the Archaic Revival is about is a revivification of the Aboriginal dream time. We are going to live in the imagination. We are preparing to decamp from three-dimensional space. I mean, yes, the Earth is the cradle of the human race, but you don't stay in the cradle forever, you know. And it's something like going into dream. It's something like taking the hyper-technical virtual reality internet head of the snake and inserting the shamanic, late Paleolithic, ecstatic, orgiastic tail of the snake, and then you have the Ouroboros completion. Then you have the quintessence, and the work is complete, and history ends, and we live then in the light of the stone made manifest.